Storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world, said Robert Mickey. The novel Wide Sargasso Sea is such an attempt by Jean Rhys through which she gives the reader the tale of a character who was treated as a mad woman in an attic. The character was Bertha Mason from Jane Eyre. Wide Sargasso Sea describes to us the life of Antoinette Causeway and all the events which took place in her life before the incident in England. The novel is split into three parts and they are in first person narration. It is narrated by Antoinette, the unnamed narrator who the reader identifies as Rochester, and Grace Poole, respectively. Now let's look into the first part, the exposition. The story is set in post-emancipation Jamaica in the early 18th century. The reader is introduced to a young Antoinette Causeway, her brother Pierre, and her mother Annette. They live at Calibri, a rundown estate. Mr. Causeway, Antoinette's father, who died a few years earlier, was in financial ruin after the slaves were freed, and the hated slave owner drank himself to death. The remaining Causeways are in a bad shape. Pierre is sickly, and Annette is depressed, while Antoinette takes comfort from her nurse Christophine. She not only takes care of the inhabitants but also ensures that the estate is maintained well as possible. Christophine understood Antoinette's dismay and introduced Tia to her. Antoinette offers genuine friendship, but Tia does not return the feeling. She robs Antoinette of her money and steals her clothes while they were playing together in the bath pool. The bitter experience endured by Antoinette makes it evident how the whole community looked down upon the Causeways. It is at this juncture Mr. Mason, an Englishman, arrives at Calibri and marries Annette. Despite the vicious gossip of the servants and the locals, things seem to be looking up for the family. The estate is repaired and Annette's disposition improves. However, she is adamant that the family should leave the area due to the resentment she senses from the former slaves towards the whites. She was well aware that, if earlier they were ignored, now they were despised. Mr. Mason thinks she is exaggerating their discontent. Soon, a protest occurs and the mob burns down their home. Pierre dies from injuries suffered in the fire, while Antoinette suffers serious injuries from both the fire and the mob. After a few weeks, Antoinette wakes from a coma. She is in her Aunt Cora's house in Spanish Town. She learns about her brother and finds out that her mother has had a mental breakdown due to the grief. Antoinette visits her one time, but her mother reacts violently. Afterwards, Aunt Cora enrolls Antoinette into a convent school. She stays with the nuns and is taught how to be a lady. She rarely sees her family as Aunt Cora has moved to England and Mr. Mason travels around Jamaica on business and visits infrequently. One such visit occurs when Antoinette turns 70. Mr. Mason tells Antoinette that friends are coming to visit from England and implies one will marry her. The rising action takes place in the second part of the novel. When it starts, the wedding has taken place and Antoinette's husband narrates the story. The name Rochester is not said anywhere in the novel, and it is from the description that the reader identifies him as Rochester. The couple is traveling to the Windward Islands to Grand Bois for their honeymoon. All the while, Rochester worries that he rushed into the marriage and does not really know his wife. Richard Mason, Antoinette's step-brother, paid Rochester to marry her, and Rochester agreed because he is desperate for money to pay off a debt. Rochester does not enjoy the honeymoon spot, which is a property Antoinette has inherited, and does not trust the servants, particularly Christophine, to whom Antoinette is especially close. Antoinette tries to explain the way of life and the ways of the servants. While Rochester never seems completely comfortable, he and Antoinette grow closer and enjoy a passionate love life. A few weeks pass and Rochester receives a letter from Daniel Causeway, who claims to be an illegitimate child of Antoinette's father. The letter says Antoinette comes from a family with madness which she has inherited. Rochester believes the letter is true and starts to see signs of Antoinette's madness. Antoinette senses that Rochester has changed the way he feels about her, so she goes to Christophine and convinces her to give her an obeah, a spell in the form of a potion common to the native people of the Caribbean, even though Christophine suggests she should leave him instead. Rochester gets a second letter from Daniel Cosway and visits him. Cosway makes more accusations about Antoinette, and while Rochester is disgusted by Cosway, he believes what he is told. When Rochester awakens early the next morning, he realizes he has been drugged and seduced by Antoinette. He is furious, and later that day he has an encounter with Amélie, another servant of the household, while Antoinette is within hearing distance in the next room. Antoinette is devastated. She goes to Christophine and is away for a few days. Upon returning, she is furious with Rochester and loses control. Her actions are like those of a mad woman. She eventually collapses. The falling action occurs when Christophine comes and says to Rochester how he has destroyed Antoinette. She suggests he try to love her again or go to England without her. Rochester refuses and orders Christophine off the property. Refusing both of her suggestions, Rochester makes plan to take Antoinette to England and seals her fate in the attic. The third part happens in England and is narrated by Grace Poole. She is the woman who guards Antoinette in the attic. The perspective shifts to Antoinette alone. She is clearly confused about where she is and how long she had been there. When her step-brother visits, Antoinette becomes violent, but she quickly forgets the incident. The resolution takes place as Antoinette has a recurring dream involving stealing Grace's keys and exploring the rest of the house, lighting candles, and setting the house on fire. One night after awakening from the dream, Antoinette steals the keys, leaves the room, and heads downstairs while holding a candle. The novel ends at this point, leaving the reader contented, in my opinion. The whereabouts and mystery surrounding the madwoman is lifted, her action justified, and cementing the fact that heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard, sweeter. Thank you.